All right. Good morning and afternoon, everybody. Like Brent said, I'm Dylan Thomas. I'm a Senior Director of Strategic Solutions here at Blue Motus. If you're not that familiar with Blue Motus, we're a digital agency based out of Denver with remote folks in 23 states. And we focus mostly on CMS-based projects and custom web development. Um, so uh, this session is, we're doing a series of working sessions, combination of teaching and doing. This is about web accessibility, set for about 60 minutes. Want to cover, my agenda here is what is web accessibility? Who does poor web accessibility hurt? Why should you care? Where does my organization need to pay attention? We'll go through questions, and then when are you going to talk about my site already? There'll be plenty of time for that, hopefully, if we have any brave volunteers. So planned outcomes. I really hope that you'll get to this part before questions, but that what web accessibility is, how it's quantified, the difference between the different standards and laws, what those highest impact items are, and that this isn't you have to tear everything down and start over. Like, you can make small incremental improvements that have huge impacts, and that it's not a checkbox, it's not a task, it's not a project that's done and over, it's a metric. It's like traffic to your website or performance. It's, your accessibility will go up and it'll go down, and it's never going to be static unless you never change your website. So with that, what is web accessibility? And there's a couple different ways to think about this. Most simply, it's that everything on your website can be accessed by anybody who wants to in a meaningful way. It's pretty straightforward, but when you think about it, but how is that quantified? And the WCAG, which is the Web Consortium Accessibility, there's the initiative, and they have these guidelines. This is part of the W3C. They're the ones who write all the standards for the internet. That without them, there would be no internet, essentially. So they've created a referenceable standard of gradable criteria where you can, pass or fail very easily, going through a number of things. There's 3 gradings, what they call A, which is minimum or must, which is if you have a website and you're not doing this, people probably can't use your website at all. There's AA, which is, this is the part where everybody is trying to get to. And this is a very accessible site that's really useful for everybody, that doesn't present any major roadblocks to anybody using either assistive technology or different screen sizes or anything like that. And then AAA is if you want to go the extra mile and say, we want our site to be very accessible or the most accessible. We want it to be the easiest for the most number of people. Those are standards that you can sort of aspire to, right? There's also, this is codified in law, kind of all over the place. So in the US, there's the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Section 508 of that act states that US federal government agencies and services have to provide equal access to everybody. So this applies only to the government providing services and people providing services to the government. So I dealt with this a lot when I worked in DC, and we would build things for government agencies, either for use with the public or for externally or for internal use. That US federal government is Section 508. On the flip side, there's the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, which says everybody who's not the federal government has to as well. So they both say the same thing, but for different audiences. We also deal with the Canadian Human Rights Act of 1985, which basically says that you have to provide information. You can't discriminate against people providing them information. And the thing that we see more often is that there's the provincial laws. So like the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act or the AODA does the same thing. And then the EU, they have their Web and Mobile Accessibility Directive, which they launched in 2016, says the same thing. All these say the same things. There's other laws and regulations and everything like that, but generally what they do is they just increase penalties for enforcement. So if you're a school and you get public money, then the punishments are harsher than otherwise. If you're a hospital and you get public money, same thing. Most countries have some version of these laws, and a lot of states do as well, different provinces, stuff like that. And the W3C, keeps a list of those, that link. So it seems like there's a lot of different things to comply with, but in what I can only describe as an outbreak of sanity, everybody has decided that compliance with anything equals complying with WCAG 2.0 AA. So specific set of standards at a specific level. And so anywhere that you see accessibility compliance, ADA compliance, Section 508 compliance, AOADA compliance, all that means is WCAG 2.0 AA. So who's hurt by poor accessibility? And this is the part that usually surprises people, is that 1 in 5 people in the US and the EU, where this survey was taken, self-identify as having a disability, which is 66 million people in the US. And 1 in 4 families have at least one person with a disability. Now, disability is a loaded word, and we don't get into this conversation when it comes to web accessibility, because disability does not refer to a kind of a personal health condition. It doesn't refer to something that's wrong with somebody. It has to do with, there's a person and there's a thing they want to do, and there's a mismatch between those things, and that's how the word disability is used. So it's an inability to do something based on your situation. Now, this breaks down, there's sort of 3 different, there's 3 different kind of vectors that this can go along. And I'm using these graphics from Microsoft's Inclusive Design Guide, which is great. I think everybody should read it. But you have situational, temporary, and permanent. And this can kind of see, like, everybody's been along this spectrum, right? So you have 26,000 people in the United States that don't have an arm. They're born without an arm, they lost an arm in an accident, it was amputated due to a medical issue, something like that. Then at any other point, there's 13 million people that, have a temporary unuse of their arm, right? So my 8-year-old last summer broke his arm while he was rollerblading. I said, well, why weren't you wearing your wrist guards? And he said, well, I can't throw a football while I'm wearing my wrist guards. So the most 8-year-old injury ever is that he was playing football while learning how to roller skate and broke his arm. And then situationally, I have 2 kids. I have gone probably years only using one arm because I was holding the other one. So, if you solve for the sort of worst case or most extreme case, which is people that never have use of their arms, you will make life easier and better for people that temporarily, they're holding something with one arm, or they broke their arm, or their mouse is broken, or something like that. So the idea here is that everybody has different abilities at different times, and that, this isn't for somebody else. This is for you, just maybe not this second. So why should we care? I've got 4 really good reasons for you, and it doesn't matter what order you put them in, but all of these are important. Laws, money, morals, and SEO. So in 2017, UK, I don't know how they calculated this, but they said they calculated a direct loss of $15 billion due to inaccessible websites. 71% of users will leave a site that doesn't meet their accessibility needs. I was reading a story on Smashing Magazine about accessibility and equivalent experiences, and so the author reached out on Twitter to say, hey, what kinds of accessibility horror stories do you have? And this one guy wrote back and said, I went to this website. It looks great. They make amazing stereos. I did not buy the $1,600 stereo that I was planning on buying because I could not get their shopping cart to work, you know, and that's just ridiculous. So how many times, times as many, shopping carts on the internet, how much money is being lost. 80% would spend more time on an improved site. Seems pretty self-explanatory. In 2018, there were 2,088 lawsuits over websites, which, perhaps coincides with our, spike in web accessibility interest about 2 years ago. So, and the last thing is that search engines are really just screen readers, that they're robots. They look at text, interpret the text, and do something with it. So if you optimize something for a search engine, you're improving it for accessibility. And pretty much everything that you do for accessibility improves your search engine results because it's better explaining or relating your content and your experience in a textual way, which is searchable, machine readable, readable by screen readers, accessible in lots of different ways. So where do we pay attention? So this is a modified version of the presentation that I gave our team a while ago. As far as the web is concerned, we have 3 senses: sight, touch, and hearing. Then we also have 3 devices. We have our eyes for seeing, we have our keyboards for touch, and we have search engines and screen readers for hearing. And then we have 3 areas of responsibility. So there's visual design, front-end development, and back-end development. These coincide directly with the senses and devices, like straight across. And then there's some stuff for everybody to do. So from a visual design perspective, there's a couple of things that can there's things that you need to think about. So there's low vision, which is people can't see stuff real well. So there's a lack of sharpness, or you have clouded vision or tunnel vision or central field loss. There's some cool apps that can help you simulate this, and actually Chrome just built it into their accessibility tools. And there's also color blindness, where you can't distinguish colors. So the first thing I want our visual design team to do is deal with contrast. So contrast is the ability to differentiate between 2 things. And this comes up most commonly in web with foreground versus background. And what we found in general is that most well-sighted people will see 3:1 as a sufficient contrast ratio for both design as well as readability. Like 3:1 is a really good contrast. But that's only A level. To be AA level, you need to be at least 4.5:1. And for AAA, it's 7:1. And you can see how, as you go from left to right on this, how it gets more and more readable. Now there's some nuance to the rules about how large text can be less contrasty than small text and still be compliant, which makes sense because it's bigger, it's easier to read, and that kind of increases its differentiation. The second biggest thing is that color isn't enough. You can't use color just to convey any particular information. So contrast, a lot of people think about it as color, but it's really differentiation in lots of different ways. So this is a screenshot of a random website. For a very long time, it was fashionable to have links not be underlined on websites. The problem with that is if you are not really well sighted, or there's contrast, or it's bright outside on your phone, you may not be able to tell the difference in that color, and you lose what the link is, what the heading is, what's around. It just gets lost. This, I think, is a great. This shows what color blindness can do, and that if you try to differentiate things only with color, that the contrast can completely disappear and the color coding becomes meaningless. So around the time that I did this presentation, we discovered that about three of our solution leads were colorblind. I think 2 of them definitely knew it. I'm not sure if the 3rd one knew it at the time. But that also makes sense because at the time we had about 80 colleagues. We had about 40 male colleagues, and about 8% of the adult population has color blindness. Males have color blindness. So that's about 3.2. So the fact that we had 3 was perfectly normal. Only about 0.5% of women have color blindness. So shapes can help with this. You can see on the right, this is easier for everybody to differentiate, not just people without with color issues. The other thing you can do is use patterns. So when you take away the color or you change the colors, color coding goes away again, and patterns can help a lot. One of our solution leads, people always used to comment on how he had the best, most interesting socks. And it was these crazy patterns and just really cool pictures and things like that. And he said to me one day, he's like, Dylan, you know what? He's like, I'm colorblind, and it's the only way I can make sure my socks match. So I was remember that and thought that was a good lesson. The other thing is that icons and text can help. Here, how many times have you seen you had an error message on error on a form where you didn't submit and you didn't know why? Maybe the indication was too subtle. Maybe there wasn't one at all. Maybe you didn't know what the problem was. Here it's much more apparent. It's got an icon. It's got an explanation of what the issue is, and you can see that if you took away all the color here, you would still see that there's a problem. So front-end development. This is I say here, almost everything that isn't a mouse is more like a keyboard than anything else. And this goes for voice interfaces, because voice interfaces basically just use words, which goes down to typing essentially. You've got switches, which essentially is just it's like hitting the space bar or the tab button. You've got eye blinking, devices. You've got all sorts of things. So all of these things are like buttons, where as opposed to mice are really unique in this way. And this comes into a lot of different hand issues, right? So there's lots of reasons why you wouldn't be able to use a mouse really well. Maybe your trackpad's broken, your mouse is broken, you're out of batteries, you lost it, you have a cast on your arm. There's all sorts of reasons why. So keyboard accessibility is the biggest thing that the front-end dev team can take care of. And what's great about it is if they just experience the site with a keyboard and it works well, then they've done so many other things right. Like this is a great way to, functionally cut through, a ton of different tests that you don't have to test for specifically. So if you can navigate the whole site with a keyboard, there's a ton of things that you did right. So there's the 3 things that we always look for are skip link and focus state, drop-down navigations, and forms. So if you don't know what a skip link is, it's the first, if you're navigating through a website by tabbing through the links, usually the first link before the logo or the link after the logo, will pop up and say, hey, skip the navigation, skip straight to the main content. And that lets you not have to tab through all of the navigation every time. This is, I'll demo this in a minute, and it'll make a lot of sense. Focusing means that you can tell really easily what you've selected. And so on the gov.uk site, you can see that they're highlighting everything in a really bold yellow. They're reversing out the text. Like you can't miss the fact that this, of what you've selected. So there's different types of skip links. So, you know, Wirecutter has a skip link after the logo. Firefighters First Credit Union, they have multiple skip links, which I'll show you this, but you can dive straight to the login. And you know, the Guardian has something like this, where it's just like, it's a little link at the top that shows up, then goes away. And then drop downs. There's so many bad ways to make drop downs. And this is an example, this is sort of the gold standard of a, you know, super accessible mega menu, which I'll demo in a minute. As far as backend development, the biggest thing this has to do with is with labeling, because screen readers and search engines don't know, they don't have any context. They don't know what anything is. So whereas visually I can tie that this headline to a read more link, you know, a screen reader is just going to say link, read more, and have no idea what it's for. So that lets you, you know, labeling this tells a screen reader and a search engine what this link goes to and how it's important. So one of our first Kinnico MVC, our first Kinnico MVC site, actually the first one ever launched, was for Navitus.com. And so as we were going through building the site, we were using Site Improve to like score the site on accessibility and typos and SEO and everything else. And so we did, we were at 62%. And you can see that originally it just said, okay, here's the link to the item, and it says read more. We added in a ARIA label, which is something that, you know, screen readers and search engines use. And we just said read more about the news title. And then we also missed the logo. We didn't have alt text on the logo. We did those two things and went from 62% to 85%. We did 4 other things and we got to 100%. So this just goes to show that like tiny little changes, especially changes that are repeated over and over and over. So on this site, you know, they have, you know, a couple hundred resources and a bunch of articles and all this kind of stuff. You know, they have like 300 read more links. So we fixed this in one place in the template, and you know, it just went crazy. You know, we went from 62% to 100%, you know, with like a day or two's work. And now everybody. So the most important thing when it comes to web accessibility is to be aware of it. And, you know, my experience and my hope for you all is that once you see it, you sort of can't unsee it. And so it's always in the back of your mind. And then to advocate for it when you're making changes, when you're making updates, when you're looking at new projects, when you're talking to new partners and vendors and, you know, developers, to say, well, how do you handle this stuff? Because this is really important. And at some point or another, we're all editing content, and, you know, using appropriate alt text in images is super important. And I'll talk about that when we get to the demo stage as well. So in summary, your visual team needs to have a contrast plan and not rely on color. The front end team needs to make it browsable by keyboard, and the back end team needs to label stuff. And then everybody else needs to be aware of accessibility as an issue, advocate for it in whatever way that they can, and use appropriate alt text. So I think now we'll have a period of questions, and then I'll show you some stuff. Any questions?
I would like to know if you are able to share your PowerPoint with us.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely will.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to send out this PowerPoint, the deck, as well as the recording, and then we're also going to put together a sort of, you know, 1 or 2 pager like cheat sheet with, you know, all the resources that I'm going to talk about, as well as, you know, kind of a you know, summarized view of this. What else? Okay.
Looks like we're good.
Well, then I will switch over to showing you some stuff. Brent, I'm right on time. So.
I know, this is great planning.
Yeah. Okay, so let me start here. So first thing I want to do is talk about skip links. So here are two random pages. These are two random pages from two websites I go to all the time. Lifehacker and Wirecutter. I'm a total Wirecutter freak. So the impact of this is that, so you can see that this is where my browser is focused. I hit tab. So this is my first tab. And to get to the content that's down here, I have to tab. Oh, my mouse is going crazy. Let's count one. Oh, let's go back over here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Also down here, the focus styles, it's hard to tell where I am. I got lost for a second. 25, 26, 27, 28. And now, okay, so I'm down here at 28. So it took me 28 tabs to get here. I have this cool focus thing, this cool bookmarklet that'll tell you like what tab order everything is in. So you can see you go across here, then down here, across here, across here, across here, down, to, down like this. One thing that you'll notice is that their menu, their account menu and their other menu are not tabbable. You cannot get to these without a mouse. There's no way to do it. I've tried. So that's an accessibility issue right there. All they have to do here is add this into the tab order, which would mean, setting an attribute to be tab index equals 0, which means it's tabbable, and that's it. So they're missing out there. Their focus highlighting could be better because it kind of get lost sometimes, and it doesn't really flow with it. You can see how that this can be sort of an issue. So, but every time I want to get down to here, I have to tab 28 times. So in contrast, so let's do focus order here. So here I'm going to start out. I'm going to hit tab, so I'm hitting the logo, so I can go back to the home page anytime. The next one is the skip link shows up. I hit enter, and now I'm down in the article. So you can see I jumped over, a million links, it seems like. And I can do that every time. The first time you do it, it's not a big deal, but after a while, it gets really, really cumbersome. The thing that I'll ding Wirecutter on is that they have all these drop-down menus, but that these aren't accessible by keyboard. Where they get a pass on this is that they do have top level pages for each of their categories. So there is an electronics page to which I can get to all of the other things. But the fact that you can't, go down into the drop-down menu in keyboard, is not great. A different kind of skip link, I like this one because this is a multi-target skip link. So you can have more skip links here. You can have as many skip links as you want. You can put them anywhere. So I hit one, this will take me to the main content of the page, or I can go to the online banking login, or I can skip to the sitemap. So skipping to the sitemap is a really nice accessibility tip because if it lists all the pages on your site, it makes it really easy for people to find stuff with the keyboard, especially because they can search, they can tab through it, all this stuff is fine. But especially if you have a login on your website, being able to just say skip there, I go to that, I start typing in, I've skipped over the whole nav, and I've gotten exactly where I want to go. This was 2 extra lines of code. It was a link and an ID, that's it. As far as the accessible mega menu, so what's nice about this is this is something that Adobe put out, and it's, people have modified it, but this is gold standard for it. You can download this, you can use it, it's totally free and open source. So you can use your tab, you can tab through the whole thing. You can go back and forth using tabs, using the arrows, using the space bar. you know, this is really intuitive and easy to understand. You know, like you can get through the whole thing really easily. You can go through it linearly. You can skip through different parts of it. You know, it's a great way to go. So that's one of the first things that I look for when I look at a site. Let's see, let's go to the other, let's go to this one. So actually, let's just go back. Any questions on skip links or drop down navigation? Nope, okay. So let's talk about contrast. So contrast is, you know, obviously super important. There's, so I just went to the New York Times because I'm going to show you that you know, everybody can, you know, use some help every now and then, and even you know New York Times, which is, you know, their whole thing is publishing, and they have, you know, millions of articles in their backlog, and that they take accessibility really seriously. I know this for a fact. There's still things that they can do. So one of the easiest ways to check for contrast is to use there's a couple of different plugins that I use in Chrome. You can also get them for Firefox, but this one's called WCAG Color Checker, Contrast Color Checker. And what it does is it looks at the page and it'll look at all the elements and tell you what the contrast ratio for all the elements is. So we're going to say that we want, you know, AA compliance. We could turn on color blindness mode if we wanted, but I'm not going to deal with that at this point. But we can see that there's all of these elements that are greater than 4.5, and there's all these elements that are less than 4.5. So this, let's look at this. I need to move this one. So this, and then it'll show you where it is. So this caption byline. So what we find is that their bylines are too small. Let's see. And where'd that go? I think the video window's in the way. There we go. And oh, I clicked the thing too much. My browser slows down sometimes when I'm running plugins and Zoom and everything all at once. So again, these bylines, they're not contrasty enough. And so it tells you down here, you know, the size of it, you know, what the foreground color is, what the background color is. Sometimes if you get things that are over backgrounds, they'll it'll get that wrong, so, especially if you're like over a photo. So you could say, you could tell it what the background color is. You can say it's actually, that's the background color, and that it'll recalculate. So there's two basic approaches when you come into a contrast issue. So this Navitus is a client of ours, has a very, very similar color scheme to it we used to have. And they said, these are our brand colors. This is, you know, we're not going to change them. We've been through so much battles about this, like we just can't. There's no way. We're gonna have to find a way to make this work. Their color scheme, like, you know, everything is you know, contrast, you know, for well-sighted people, it's contrasty, it's easy to read, you know, could be better, but it works really well. Contrast is right around 3 to 1. The problem is if we push these any further, then if we push the colors any further, they would just basically all turn into brown before they got contrasty enough. So the alternative for that is that you can have an alternative, you can take your site and make it more contrasty, allow people to have a switch of some kind. And as long as that switch is contrasty enough, then, you know, you're compliant. So Navitus's entire color scheme was you know, non-compliant. And so we said, hey, let's just do a whole nother color scheme. You know, we'll do a high contrast, like dark mode. And so what that looks like is when you hit this button, it looks like this. So we have black on white. A lot of the other colors stay the same. We, darkened these up so that we darkened up this blue, everything like this. For high contrast, this is much, much more readable. And this is, the thing about it is if you're going to do a whole nother contrast theme, you might as well go for 7:1. Might as well go for AAA because it's going to be different anyway. On the flip side, you have Dunkin' Donuts, which I love this example. One, because I love donuts, and two, because it's a really subtle change. So if you look at this, site's pretty contrasty, like seems really bright and bold, but they have some problems with their orange and they have some problems with their, light pink. So if you hit high contrast, it makes some very subtle changes. I'll go back and forth. So what you can see is all of their orange text turns to black. Also their rainbow text over here. Their important links have a black, opaque line under them instead of the light pink semi-opaque. And that these buttons have both the buttons have gotten larger and the text has gotten larger. And the backgrounds have like faded away a little bit to put more focus on the text. So, if you just have a little bit of an issue, you can just make a little bit of a change. So that's what I like about that. Another good example is Saudia. So the Saudi Arabia airline. So this is their normal version, which you can see they're going to have problems with white on tan. They're going to have some problems with this purple, with white on purple, and some of this other stuff. This seems really this kind of blue on blue gray. You can see where you've got these lower contrast items, right? So if you switch to high contrast mode, this goes to dark brown, to dark gray and black, from the tan. This is darker brown. This is darker brown. Down here, we've got dark grays and blacks. Here, they drop out the background and it's over, this off-white. So, they had a design that they liked and they just needed to tweak it a little bit. Personally, I like the high contrast version better. That happens. I've talked with folks that, especially folks that like dark mode. If there's a high contrast version of a site, they'll use that more often just because they like it better. So that's as far as, and then there's something new that I just found out yesterday actually, which if you use Chrome DevTools, which you can get, and which this works on Firefox too. They have a very, very similar issue, a very similar feature, is that if you do this pointer thing, so you select this pointer, and if you hover over things, it will tell you stuff about it. So how big it is, the contrast ratio. And so at the bottom it has the contrast ratio, and whether it passes or not, which is really nice because you don't need any, if you just want to check something real quick, you don't need any special plugins or anything like that. So any questions on contrast?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
If when it comes to implementing like two different versions, if you were going to do a high contrast and a low contrast, like what is the level of effort that's generally associated with that? I mean, is it essentially like two different sites, or it's just more like on the styling side?
For the way that we've done it is it's 100% on the styling side, and depending on how your styling is constructed, it could be extremely simple. Like it could be a matter of just changing some color variables and adding a high contrast output. Or it could be that you need to, kind of go through everything and have basically a duplicate version of the color of all the color declarations and change those out. And then it's a little bit of JavaScript to put in like a button that toggles it back and forth. In any case, you're looking at a couple of days tops for your, kind of design and dev team to, come up with the color scheme, validate it, update the CSS and implement the switcher. So if you have a lot of contrast problems, that's probably the easiest way to take care of it. Especially if you have very strict brand standards where you really have to use certain colors. What we found is that it's way easier to say, we're going to have a whole other high contrast accessible color scheme, that is coherent with the brand, but could be completely different, than it is to say, we're going to shift the core website from this orange to this orange and this green to that green, and stuff like that. So, and a lot of designs, like if you just shifted the things that needed to be different, they may look great or they may look awful. It depends. But implementing a second color scheme should only be a couple of days, tops. What else? You guys want to see how easy it is to put a skip link in? Okay. This will give you a skip link, 100%. If you add this to your CSS and this to your HTML, with this being the ID of your main content, that's it. This will hide the link unless it's tabbed to, and it'll show this, and then it'll disappear. So that's also given the level of effort of the style sheet switcher. I think there's no reason why people shouldn't have a skip link. I've seen our guys implement this on existing sites in like minutes. So, all right. Well then, so now was a more interactive portion. So I'm going to show you how I assess the accessibility of a website. So this is your chance to get free work, settle an argument, dunk on your competitors, piss off your boss, whatever, or just some website that you're curious about. And if not, I have a random website generator that I'll use. Is there anything in the chat?
Nothing yet.
Okay. Nobody wants me to do their website? I've done this one before.
Oh, there we go. We got a couple.
Okay, here's a few. All right. Okay. Well, first I'll show you. I'll show you what this is. My unscientific thing that. Oh, yeah, here we go. There's a whole bunch of them. Okay. So this is what I do. I say, is there a skip link? Can I nav? Are there focus styles? Can I search by keyboard? A lot of sites that are really accessible and have great, movement, you can't search by keyboard. Are the links distinguishable? Like, are they underlined? The one caveat here is that in navigation links don't need to be underlined because they're in a navigation, which is known to be like a list of links. The read more links, I look if there's labels on the social icons. If the icons if the other icons on the site, if they're using, if they're labeled incorrectly. Alt text, are there images with text, and then contrast is the last thing I check. So let me go back to, oh, I lost the chat window. All right, I haven't seen this one before. I've seen the other sites before, so I'm going to do this one. I'm going to do this one totally cold. Okay, so I have never seen this website before. Hillsborough County Sheriff. Okay, sounds good. So I'll let it finish loading. Okay. All right. So I've not clicked or touched anything. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tab through and see where I end up. Okay. Okay. I see these. Okay. So I'd say that the focus styles are a little subtle for my taste because I didn't see them to begin with. Now I see them, but I didn't see them at all. I'm able to, let's see here. Okay, I can go down into, I can tab through all of these. That's good. Okay, what happens when I get to the end of this one? Oh yeah, this is, I like this nav. This is good keyboard nav. Oh, okay. Okay. I would have, okay, so maybe, so the question is, can I search by keyboard? Oh, okay. Yeah, I could search, that's good. Okay. Links distinguishable, let's see. Okay, so these links all have underlines, underline links. That's good. Okay, let's check this is where I start to get geeky. I start checking the code. So, okay. ARIA label, yeah, HCCO official Facebook page, offsite link. Yep. No, that's a really good link. That'll tell people exactly what it is. I would have been happy if you just said Facebook, but that's even better. Let's see, icons. What I would not want to see is that this says like telephone on it. And I think that it won't based on what I'm seeing right here. Come on. Yep, that's good. Okay. All right, let's look for some images. See what the alt text is like. So the thing with alt text is if the image is content, you want it to have alt text to describe what the image is. However, you don't want to do, if it's just purely decorative, like, lots of times, there's a, a bank will have somebody, just standing in front of their house, right? There's no content there. It's atmospheric and it's decorative, but there's no content related to, the content there. So yeah, these are appropriately labeled. The fact that these could both, I believe these all match. Yeah. For this one, because there's no, for the default, because there's nothing here, there's no image, I would actually have this be empty. And then what that tells screen readers is that there's no information here you need to worry about. And you could do that on all of these actually, because if they're just the name of the title, if they're just the title of the article, that's not really telling me anything different. If, for instance, this looks like this image, if this was like, I would caption this as like long table of food at food bank or something. But giving it the same title as the article doesn't really tell me anything different. But that's a really minor nitpick, given the fact that you have alt text at all. And let's see, what about this here? Okay, this has empty alt text. Given that this is the link back to, oh wait, I missed something there. Usually you want your logo to like just be the name of your organization and have that link back to the homepage. I think I may have clicked on the wrong thing. Oh yeah, this has alt. Yeah. So I would say this site's really good as far as accessibility goes. They're, like I said, you can always you can always improve things. Actually, that's one thing that you can always improve things, but the site is a really good start, really good baseline. The other thing you can do is if you want to use plugins, there's one that I like called Axe, and this will analyze the page and tell you what may be a problem. So here it gives you different types of errors. What this tells you is that there's nothing for violations, and this is the same as a lot of other things. There's things you should check, things that are warnings that they're not sure of, and there's things that are definitely 100% they know are wrong. So there's nothing on this site, on this page, that is for sure 100% wrong. There's some things they want you to look at to see if these have sufficient color contrast. And there's some things that have the same link with similar purpose. So that's a little bit more, that's kind of a higher level check. But we'll just do color contrast real quick. All right, so it's thinking that you do get some false positives here sometimes, because this is okay. So this is a hidden element. This is also a hidden element, it looks like. And this, it doesn't know about this because, like I said before, this is a background. This is a background image, so it doesn't know what color to use. So, but if I use this color, it's fine. Cool. All right. BBK Law, you guys are a client, and I know you guys have been working on a bunch of this stuff. So playing with fire here. Meredith, don't yell at me.
We actually haven't started their ADA stuff yet, Dylan.
Oh, good. So I should find lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So, whoa, what happened? Okay, that's confusing. You know what? I bet this is your mobile menu, but it's still focusable on desktop. I bet that's what this is, because you have your other menu. I'm gonna do some, I'm gonna go. I bet that these are gonna have really high tab order. Yep. All right, so you have your mobile menu that's hidden, but it's still focusable. So that's something that it should be not focusable on when the desktop nav is showing. Okay, let's start. Go back. Okay, so I'm going to start here. There we go. Okay. Okay, so what I can see down here is, and if you look in the lower left, see BBK Law, Our Perspective, Digital Information Management, Employee Pensions, Public Infrastructure, Transportation. What's happening is that we're focusing on those links. We're able to get through them, but your drop-down nav isn't showing. So what that needs to do is you need to fix the CSS so that when these links are focused, that the drop-down nav shows. This is a really straightforward thing to do. I've seen it a bunch of times. It's not, depending on how the menu is constructed, it's usually not that big of a deal. So focus styles could use help, make these a little bit more apparent. I'm just gonna go back. I'm gonna start over here so I don't get lost. Okay, our locations. Okay, so it looks like you skip over this and just go here. Okay, so that's a link down here. Okay. Yeah, let's see here. Let's look at these. These links have links. So what I'd look for here is that they're not duplicated. So icon, Facebook, yeah, those look fine.
Dylan, I know we're getting
Yeah,
to
we
the end of
got
the
a
hour here,
couple
but
minutes left.
I did want to just, for anybody, a couple people had to drop. For anybody that does have to drop, everyone who registered for the event, I have your contact information, and we'll reach out with recordings and documents after the fact. So if any of you do want to, stay around for a wrap up, that's fine. But if you have to leave early, we will send all of this out, to anyone who does have to leave.
Cool. So thanks, Brant. So given that, I don't have anything after this. I can stay on longer if people have questions.
And if anyone does want to reach out to Dylan or I, for a quick run through, we can schedule time to hop on a call with you, walk through your site, and give you some quick feedback, or anything like that individually. Or if you want to reach out with just any additional follow-up questions, we're happy to answer those as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. Well, I hope that was useful for everybody.
Yep.
All right, and have a great day.
Yeah.
Oh,
appreciate everybody's
can
time.
I show the contrast plugin again? Sure. Alicia. All right, so anybody? Let's see here. So I have a couple different plugins that I use for contrast. And what we find is, like most plugins and systems, there's lots of there's lots of different ways to skin a cat. One I like using is called the WCAG Contrast Color Checker. I find that this is like one of the easiest ones. If you're just looking at contrast, it's one of the easiest ones to look at. If it loads, it's slow. Let's see here. I already have it open on this one, so I'll just go back over here. So yeah, this is a Chrome extension, but there's similar things that are available for Firefox. One of the nice things is that the new version of Edge is built on Chrome. Essentially, it's Microsoft's version of Chrome. So you can use Chrome extensions on the new Edge, which is actually what I do most of the time. So this, I'll send a link out to it. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to pull together, all of the resources linked to and referenced in this discussion into kind of a concise list, since there's a lot of external stuff we referred to, and want to make sure that that doesn't get lost or you don't feel like you had to take notes. Mm-hmm. So in addition to the deck, we will be sending this stuff out as well, just so you have kind of a quick access cheat sheet for some of this information.
And I'll show you one other cool thing. I found this out yesterday, that Chrome will let you emulate color blindness. If you go to, oh, come on. Now my computer's just freaking out. Okay, yeah, if you pick rendering, and then at the bottom, you can say emulate vision deficiencies. You can say blurred vision. This is what your website looks to people that have blurry vision. And then the different types of color blindness. This is much more drastic on on sites with a lot of photos. You can see it better. You can also completely get rid of color, which is this one, which is just everything in black and white. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll send out all the resources, and thanks so much for everybody joining.